Dr. Michelle Loria, the Enterprise CMIO, and today we're going to talk about MPage personalization and chart review. We're going to talk about the difference between MPages and table of contents, and in particular, how that impacts dynamic documentation. We're going to review the chart review filters within MPages and then show you how to personalize your MPages so that they reflect your style for when you see patients. And we're also going to talk about the 3-pane view. I'm logged into the build environment, and you can see that I am in the table of contents. I've clicked on the provider view, and you can see that within the provider view I have a number of tabs across the top, and these are different MPages, and I am in the ambulatory MPage. Workflow MPages are different than summary MPages in that you have a list of components on the side of the workflow MPage, and you can rearrange these components to reflect how you see patients. You can also hide components so that you don't have to see them all the time if they are rarely used. In addition, with workflow MPages, you can refresh just a small part of the MPage, or you can refresh the entire MPage. For dynamic documentation, you can only tag items that are within a workflow MPage. You can't tag items from the table of contents. So as you are building your notes, you really want to be in the workflow MPage as much as possible. Thinking about the workflow MPage compared to the table of contents, the table of contents gives you a static list of tabs. The top 4 or 5 tabs are going to be the ones that we think are going to most commonly used, and we've based that on data we've received from Cerner use. The next list of items are tabs that are a little less commonly used, and they are arranged alphabetically. With the workflow MPage, you can arrange these tabs in any order you want. And so I have arranged these tabs to reflect what I do when I see patients. Because I'm a maternal fetal medicine specialist, a lot of my time is spent counseling patients about medication exposure during pregnancy. So I always start with allergies and home medications, and then I move to building my problem list because I also see patients because they have underlying medical disease. However, other providers different specialties may want to organize these in a different way. You can also see that I've moved a lot of things down to the bottom. I could have hidden some of these. I have a lot of items on this on my MPage in the build environment because we're still building, but I moved them to the bottom because I didn't think I was going to be using them very often, and I didn't hide them because I didn't want to forget that they were there. In MPages, if I want to quickly move things around, I can click and drag to reflect how I see a patient. Again, in a table of contents, you can't do that. MPages are also different than the items in the table of contents in that the filters in MPages have been set up to make sure that you can see every item on a patient within that category without having to expand filters. So if I go into the Documents filter, this is going to show the last 50 notes over, I believe, 18 months in the ambulatory MPage. I could also show the last notes over 18 months, not limited to 50. So if I knew somebody had had tons and tons of documentation done on them and I didn't want to wait a long time for that MPage to load, I would use this tab. But let's say they've rarely had visits and I want to make sure I get every note. I might use this tab. I can also look at last notes in 24 hours, 7 days, and by using this drop-down, I can go as far back as 20 years, which is a tab I frequently use when I'm seeing patients with very complicated medical histories and I'm trying to find a particular item. I can also filter documents based on who wrote them and different types of items. To do that, I would go to this note types line here. So I could look at my notes only, or let's say that I'm interested in looking at all the notes associated with a specific encounter. Let's say my patient had cystic fibrosis and I wanted to see all the notes that were written within the cystic fibrosis clinic, I could group them by encounter and see everything that happened with encounters, with a specific encounter. I can also filter based on the note type. So you can see here that I'm saying only show me admission and consult notes and clinic notes, but I could say show me all provider documentation or all documents, and I can apply that. What's interesting here is that the look back filters for time are not sticky. When you log out, they're going to change. But recall that when I first pulled up the multiple note types, these note type choices are sticky and they're going to stay from encounter to encounter. In addition, the way that I organize each of the components on an MPage is sticky from patient to patient, encounter to encounter within that specific MPage. So I can have one order of components for ambulatory, but when I see inpatients, I have a much more standardized workflow, and I could have a different order for the inpatient MPages. When we go live with our discharge summary MPages, I could also rearrange that order. If I wanted to change the MPages components that I see, I can go into the Components tab, and you can see that I could choose to uncheck some of these items and that certain items are locked. And that's because the provider work group, when we looked at the MPage components, said what MPage components should always be visible to a provider during an ambulatory MPage. And the same thought process went through the inpatient MPage work. These decisions were made by your colleagues who are heavily involved, and they were consensus votes, and typically most people agreed. The final thing I want to talk about is optimizing your computer display for dynamic documentation. Dynamic documentation allows you to start building your note during the process of chart review, which is a huge time saver. When you're within the MPage, you really don't need to see the table of contents because you're able to see everything you need to see. What's very useful is to start to see the different items you might want to document on as the patient talks to you and they skip around to different components of the visit. So the first thing you need to do is set your screen resolution. If you don't see these little boxes, that means your screen at its base configuration does not have adequate resolution. So you're going to have to decrease the size of your screen display so you can go into a double pane view. Actually, this is a 3-pane view because you're going to see the MPage components listed on the left. You'll see the chart as you review it in the middle, and then you'll start to see your documentation and tagged items on the right. So to do this, you can hold down the control button and click the scroll key if you're on a traditional PC. However, if you're on a teeny tiny laptop like I am, which does not have adequate screen space to see the triple pane view, you need to first hit the control button, then hit the central button with the blue dots, and then hit this little red mouse button. And it is a little finicky. You're going to have to play with it, but you will eventually be able to get your screen to the right size. And I did that before this video, and it's working great. So I'm now going to create that triple pane view, and I'm going to create that view using the standard way I typically document, and I typically start with the history of present illness. So I'm going to click this arrow, and now I can see the history of present illness. The next thing I do is my review of systems. As we're talking, I can start to document, and I can also be tagging items while I'm doing this as well. This is sticky. So once you set up this view within a particular MPage and you exit, it will stay in this order. The only thing you'll have to do is, if the monitor doesn't have adequate resolution, is change your monitor resolution. Our fabulous IS team is working hard to ensure that we have adequate monitor resolutions in all of the places we work. As you can imagine, with an organization of our size, this is going to take some time. But by the end of within a year, all of our monitors that we as providers use should have the adequate resolution. So thanks for joining me today. We talked about MPages versus table of contents and the advantages of MPages in terms of dynamic documentation, being able to look at the chart while you document, and being able to use tagging, as well as being able to order the components around. We talked about the chart review filters, which are quick and easy to change so that you can see back 20 years. And we talked about how you can personalize your MPage. And finally, we talked about how to get the 3-pane view. I hope you found this helpful. Please let us know if there are other topics you would like to see. Oh,